Page 131. Black. Connolly pulled me out of science class. He just walked in while some kid was giving an answer and yelled out my name. "Let's go," he snorted to me. Connolly kept 2 steps behind me. I peeked back and thought his knees were going to buckle from all the weight. I heard his breathing and heavy footsteps following me down a flight of stairs to the front desk. Jefferson was there talking with my mother. "You have to sign him out," Connolly said to her as he wiped the sweat from his forehead. Jefferson walked us outside and told my mother, "I know he's made some mistakes, but that's what adolescents do. Marcus is the type of young man who's going to learn from what he did wrong. He's going to pick himself back up and succeed, and one day other kids from his neighborhood are going to look up to him for that." My mother let out a deep breath and said, "It's going to be a test for him every day from now on." Then Jefferson turned to me and said, "You don't know how lucky you are to have this strong woman in your corner." I told him that I already did. "No, you only think that you know." Jefferson came back. "You haven't seen enough at your age to really understand what it means. When you become a father one day, you'll see better. You'll understand everything your mother's done for you." Miss Torres met us at the DA's office on Union Turnpike, a few blocks from the Queen's Courthouse. She looked over the plea and gave me the okay to sign it. I pushed the paper down hard against the desk. I started out using big letters, but by the time I got to the end of my name, the letters were less than half that size. I picked the pen up off the paper, and everything inside of me felt more settled. It was finally over. I had 3 weeks before getting shipped upstate. After that, I wouldn't see my mother or sister for close to 2 years, except through a piece of glass in a prison visiting room. I wouldn't be running with Eddie either. I'd be standing on my own. I'd be doing my time with adults who could be locked up for anything. And I knew I'd probably have to fight to show them that I wasn't anybody's herb. Deep down, that had me shook. The school guidance counselor gave me a note to bring to all my teachers. They could write down what I did for them in the first half of the semester. Then, when I got into a jail school upstate, I could finish classes. I could get my diploma or take the GED exam. The next day, I saw Eddie before English class. He was waiting for me to say how it all went with the DA. I could see how anxious he was about it, but I wasn't in the mood to replay the whole scene for him. "So?" Eddie asked. "It's over for me." I kept it short. 2 girls from class came up to us and asked me how long it was going to be before I had to go to jail. Eddie looked at me like I'd been talking it up all over school, but the girls said there was a piece in the newspaper about me pleading guilty. Casey met the team at the locker room door before practice. He pulled me off to the side and told me to chill in his office. He told everyone else to dress warm and run laps around the school for the next 20 minutes. Casey said he didn't know what was going on, but the principal wanted to see us both. Miss Randolph was on the phone with some kid's parent and pointed to the 2 chairs in front of her desk. She had the kid's name right in front of me and what he did in class to get suspended. I remember the kid from the 10th grade, but I didn't want to hear a damn thing about anybody else's trouble. The second she put down the phone, Miss Randolph started talking to Casey and me. She did her part like she was reading it off the wall behind us, and the words weren't really hers. "The Queen's superintendent of high school saw the story on you in the newspaper today. He called to remind me that with your conviction you are to be removed from any extracurricular activities while you're still here," she said, raising her cheeks to add some sympathy to it. "Not that I necessarily agree with it, but I must remove you from the basketball team." When she was finished, she pushed her chair back like I might attack her, but I had a good hold on myself. Anyway, I wanted to cry more than I wanted to pound somebody. "What? What did you say?" Casey called out in shock. "He's free to walk around in the streets until he starts serving his time, but he can't play high school basketball. That's insane. You have to understand, Marcus has pled guilty to a violent crime. What if there's a scuffle in the court, and even in self-defense he injures someone?" she said with a straight face. "There could be a lawsuit against the Board of Education. Mr. Casey, you more than anyone should be sensitive what can go tragically wrong in these situations." Casey flew up from his chair and said, "Are you comparing Marcus to that animal who killed Jason Taylor? Is that what you're doing? You weren't even at this school back then." "I am not comparing Marcus to anyone," Miss Randolph shot back. "Don't put words in my mouth, Mr. Casey." I had a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach that kept on getting worse. Maybe I didn't stab somebody to death because he was a different color than me, but I helped rob people at gunpoint and almost got somebody's head blown off. And now I was going to prison, just like that bastard who killed Jason. When we got back upstairs, Casey held a team meeting. He was still steaming and his face had turned completely red. The sweat was pouring off kids from running laps. Eddie was looking at me in my street clothes and shaking his head. He probably had it figured out before anybody else. Casey turned to me and pushed his lips together. Before he could start, I told them all that I was off the team. "Because I pleaded guilty, they won't let me play," I said. I screwed up the season for everybody. I probably could have waited another 2 or 3 weeks before I took the plea. I'm sorry, I just didn't know about the rule. You don't have to be sorry to us, my brother, said X, shifting his eyes over to Eddie. You got caught out there and now you're paying the price. At least you're man enough to stand up for it. Some guys will never have that in them. Most of the team started clapping after X had his say, but Eddie just stood there with both his hands in his pockets. The principal said I couldn't stay to watch practice or sit on the bench for the playoff games the next night. My teammates said they could clap loudest for me when I walked out with my mother for senior night, and they'd tell kids around school to do the same. I thought the only time I wouldn't be with the LIC team was when I graduated and had a place to stay play in college, but I left Eddie and everyone else in the gym and went down the back stairs alone. My mother was pissed as anything over it. She said they were treating me like I was a convict already. But that night she ironed her best dress and Sabrina's too. People at seniors night are going to know that your family is still proud of you. The principal can't make all your hard work for that team just disappear, my mother said, snapping her fingers. The news about my being off the team traveled slow. The whole next day at school, kids kept coming up wishing me good luck in the game. It was like getting kicked in the ass over and over. Rose found me in the library. She wanted to tell me what kind of raw deal she thought I got from the principal. I told her it didn't really matter anyway. My life had already changed, and I was going to have to deal with whatever people put in my way from now on. She apologized for the way her parents were talking about me at home, and for them thinking that I put all of this onto Eddie. She hugged me tight, and everything hard inside me melted down a little. Eddie didn't say much to me in English class, except that he couldn't believe the Board of Education pulled the plug on black and white. Mr. Sussman still had kids reading their essays, and I was one of the last to go. I stood up and read out loud. I wasn't concentrating on anything but the words on the paper in front of me. I was sailing straight through it without even listening to the sound of my voice. Then right before the ending, I missed a word and had to stop for a second. It was like waking up out of a daydream and everybody's looking at you. In the end, I'd like people to say that I tried to be honest with them. I want them to remember the real Marcus Brown, not the ball player or anybody else. That way they'll have a clear picture in their head about me and not have to guess. I finished and sat back down. In math class, the teacher had us working in groups of 4. Eddie had his desk turned around to face me. We mostly talked about the game and let the other 2 kids with us do all the problems. It's all on you tonight, I told Eddie. Usually 200 people showed up for Friday night game, but for the playoffs and senior night, Eddie thought we'd get at least 400 people in the stand. We were playing Aviation High School. They were the last squad to make the playoffs. During the first week of the season, we beat them by almost 30 points, but they'd got a lot better since then and won just enough games to get in. Eddie and me talked about our families being next to each other before they walked out onto the court that night. We both knew that it was going to be tense. I'd rather face the DA and judge together than your mother, Eddie said. Eddie met up with Rebecca after class. I was heading out the front door alone when Jefferson called me over to his desk. He reached out into his pocket and took out $12. It's a $6 ride from the Ravenswood houses to here. I want you to take your mother back and forth by cab tonight, he said, handing me the money. I didn't want Jefferson's money, but I could tell right off that he wasn't going to take it back, so I closed a tight fist around the bills. I started to tell him how grateful I was, but Jefferson stopped me in the middle and said, "Every young brother needs a little help along the way. I'm just paying back what came down to me." Sabrina was really excited about senior night. My mother made her a fancy red dress with lace skirt, one on top of the other. It was finished more than a month ago, and Sabrina had been trying it on every Friday night since. With her hair piled up high, she looked just like a princess in it. My mother had on a long black dress with heels. Around her neck she wore a string of white pearls that my grandmother gave her before she passed away. Both of them were watching the clock and telling me that we were going to be late. I kept pushing them off. I ran for the phone the second it rang. A man on the other end said our cab was waiting outside. My mother smiled when I told her. The driver must have been wondering why my mother and sister were dressed so nice and I was wearing maroon sweats. Sabrina talked about being scared to walk out in front of the crowd the whole ride over, and by the time we got to LIC, the driver was going on about to my sister about not being nervous. He even wished the team good luck. There was still an hour before the game, and the players were just starting to warm up. The end of the first row was saved for the senior parents. I never left my mother and sister to walk over to Casey or the team, but once they started to run a layup line right in front of where we were sitting, everyone was coming up to us. On Eddie's first run through the line, he took a few steps over. I got up to meet him halfway. He gave me a pound and nodded his head in my mother's direction. She pulled Sabrina in tight to say something, and Eddie moved forward on the line. I don't think either one of them looked the other in the face for more than a second. Every time Eddie came through after that, he was focused on the basket with his game face on. The stands filled up fast. Other parents moved in the seats next to us. Casey's wife was hugging everybody, then Rose showed up with Eddie's mother and father and took the last seat in the row. Rose and me kept looking at each other over everyone's head. I wished that she was sitting right next to me, but there was no way. Jefferson and Connolly were there too. They were busy checking the kids' IDs and making sure the crowd stayed cool. I made sure to catch Jefferson's eye, just to show him that I was glued to my family. We were wearing our home whites. Aviation was dressed in green and gold. I could see myself out on the court, moving through the layup line, and every time somebody passed Eddie the ball, my hand started to twitch a little. The only time I ever watched the team play, I was sitting on the bench waiting to get back into the game. I didn't know how I was going to handle sitting on the stands. The game hadn't even started, and I wanted to jump out of my seat and take off running down the court. After a while, the president of the senior council arranged us in order along the sideline. The ceremony was almost ready to start. Ed and the other seniors came over to walk their parents across the court. The lights got turned way down until it was almost black inside the gym. Music piped in over the PA system, and kids in the stands started to hoot and holler. Miss Randolph stepped into the white spotlight and welcomed everybody to senior night. Then she handed the microphone over to Casey, who gave a speech from the heart. Our student-athletes invest a lot of time and effort in representing Long Island City High School, Casey said. That added burden is also felt at home, where the parents of our student-athletes must work even harder to give their children support. We honor those parents. The first family made their way up out to center court. The senior council president handed our player a bouquet of roses. He gave them to his mother and kissed her with everybody cheering. The next family was already moving when Miss Randolph planted herself in front of me. I told you that you couldn't be a part of any extracurricular activities. That included senior night, Miss Brown, she said. Your family can go out there, but not you. My son is walking with me, my mother told her flat out. Miss Randolph started to argue, but my mother's words turned me rock solid. I could have walked through 100 Miss Randolphs with her words running through my head. Jefferson and Connolly were in the middle of it now. I looked back over my shoulder and could see Eddie handing his mother her bouquet. My mother started to move forward with me, holding one hand and Sabrina the other, but Miss Randolph blocked our way. I wanted to boot her across the court for disrespecting my mother like that. Jefferson tried his best to get Miss Randolph to step aside. That's when some black kids in the bleachers screamed she was a racist. Connolly stormed over and told them all to shut up. A girl oinked right in his face and called him a fat pig. Connolly lost it and jerked her hard by the collar. Some dude slugged Connolly in the mouth and a bunch of kids piled on top of him. Jefferson rushed over to save his partner's ass, and everything in that corner of the stands just broke loose. When the lights didn't come on, kids started throwing things in the dark. Casey's voice boomed with the PA for everybody to stay calm. Something hard whistled right past my ear. I turned my back to the crowd and shielded my mother and sister inside my arms. Sabrina dug her nails into my stomach. Don't let them hurt me, she cried. Eddie and his parents were standing in the spotlight out at center court. I knew that Rose was taking pictures from the first row, but I didn't see her anywhere. The lights finally got turned on, but that didn't stop anything. Connolly had wrestled some kid out of the pack and was beating the shit out of him. Jefferson had to hook Connolly around the throat and slam him in the floor to get him to stop. Lots of people ran out to the court just to get it clear of that mess. Ed and his parents got swallowed up in that crowd. I lost sight of them. I saw Rose run past with tears coming down her face. If my arms were long enough, I would have reached out and held on to her, too. Casey stayed on the microphone. He kept begging people to do the right thing, and most of them did. Then the cops showed up and cleared out the whole gym. They even had to separate Jefferson and Connolly, who were pushing and shoving at each other now. There was blood rushing down from Connolly's nose to his chin. Jefferson's uniform shirt was ripped across the middle. Miss Randolph was walking in a daze from one end of the gym to the other, and my mother was giving her lip every step of the way. On the way out, I saw the broken glass in the gym floor. The case that held Jason's jersey got busted open. His uniform top was hanging loose, pinned up by only one shoulder. I reached my hand in through the sharp edges and hooked it right back on right. The cops wouldn't let anyone stand out in front of the school either. There was an ambulance parked outside and a bunch of black and whites with all their lights flashing. So we started walking home as soon as we hit the street. Sabrina looked like she just woke up from a nightmare. She was walking with the side of her face pressed up against my mother's arm. My mother's steps were slow and even. She started to shake her head as we walked. She turned to me and said, "For better or for worse, child, you'll find out everything you want to know about this world."